Russian President Vladimir Putin has predicted the fight against terror in Syria will soon be over. He was speaking on Monday while hosting the Syrian regime leader Bashar al Assad in the Russian city of Sochi. Putin said the military operation in Syria was wrapping up and the focus would now be on a political solution. Assad thanked Putin for Russia's support. The leaders of Turkey and Iran are also due in Sochi for talks this week. Meanwhile, heavy bombardment continues in rebel-held areas near Damascus, according to the Syrian Observatory of Human Rights. Activists say in the last few days, dozens of airstrikes have hit different areas in eastern Ghouta, killing 87 people and injuring 240 others. Well, let's get more on the situation with TRT World's defence analyst Oubai Shahbandar. So, first of all, let's talk about this meeting between Vladimir Putin and Bashar al Assad. That was a bit of a surprise meeting, and that comes a day before a planned meeting with other leaders in the region.
Yeah, absolutely. In an unannounced and a surprise visit to the Russian Black Sea resort town of Sochi, the Russians flew Bashar al Assad, the leader of the regime in Damascus, to Russia to meet with Putin. And it was interesting, Shuli, because this meeting was completely unannounced, and it was on a Russian military cargo flight that they flew him into Sochi, where Bashar al-Assad met with Vladimir Putin and also met with senior Russian military officials that were involved in the Russian airstrikes in Syria. It was an opportunity for Bashar al-Assad to publicly thank Putin for supporting his forces on the ground as the embattled regime leader was fighting both against rebel forces in Syria and fighting against Daesh forces. It's going to be right prior to a tripartite meeting between the leaders of Turkey, Iran, and Russia to find a way forward to end the conflict in Syria. But certainly this meeting between Bashar al-Assad and Putin was a surprise to many people. And in fact, there's this iconic picture of Bashar al-Assad giving Putin a hug. So it's clear here that the Russians hold significant amount of control and influence over Bashar al-Assad. And yet we will see as the peace talks continue the next day or so between Moscow, Ankara, and Tehran to hopefully bring the Assad on one hand and the Syrian opposition on the other side to the negotiating table, as both sides are declaring that Daesh is nearing defeat.
Yeah, and as far as these tripartite peace talks go, I mean, this is clearly completely separate from the sort of UN-sanctioned Geneva peace process going on. So what are they hoping to achieve in Sochi?
Well, they're hoping to achieve a de-escalation of the fighting and the conflict. The negotiations hosted by the United Nations are scheduled to take place in Geneva on the 28th, on November 28th. So shortly thereafter, the meeting between the leaders of Turkey, Iran, and Russia in Sochi to hopefully set a framework for these negotiations. Unfortunately, there seems to be some confusion on just who will be at the negotiating table. We just saw the other day the head of the Syrian opposition, the former Prime Minister Riyad Hijab, resigning from his position, and many other Syrian opposition leaders also resigning from the opposition side. So it still remains to be unclear what these meetings in Sochi can achieve. Many are hoping that at the very least a de-escalation of the violence will finally once and for all be achieved. As we're seeing, airstrikes, horrific airstrikes, are still taking place in the suburbs of Damascus. And just a few days ago in the northern city, Syrian city of Attar, we saw a horrific airstrike massacre in an open market. So hopefully these leaders gathering at this meeting can lead to some sort of resolution of the fighting so that UN-hosted peace talks can progress.
Oubai, thank you for that. Oubai Shahbandar in Istanbul there.